This video might not be for you if you already have the perfect compost system dialed in, but I'll bet that's not the majority of us. Most people either quit composting after a failed attempt or never even start because it feels way too complicated. I've been in both places over the past couple of decades. If you can give me 15 minutes or so, I'll break composting down to the core principles, show you 5 simple methods for any space, and share the ones that actually work for me. The easiest ones I can keep going without a lot of time, space, or energy. Because as a single mom and solo gardener, if it's not simple, I'm not going to do it. And composting really is the number 2 thing you need in order to get harvest to feed your family. Plants are number 1 because their roots provide a readily available food source for microbes in your soil, but compost is what makes it possible to maintain that healthy soil and grow the plants in the first place. So without it, building healthy soil is so much harder. The composting itself doesn't have to be, so stay with me. By the way, if you're tired of feeling stuck with grocery store prices or worrying about what's even on the shelves like me, I've got a free training linked below that shows you how to grow high-value food even in a small space. Composting is part of that system, but this training takes you through the bigger picture so you can actually feed your family from your garden. At its core, compost is just broken down organic matter like leaves, grass clippings, kitchen scraps, and garden waste that turns into the best fertilizer you'll ever use. When it's ready for the garden, it smells like rich soil and you don't see scraps anymore. Technically, though, it's not fully finished until it becomes humus, which is the dark spongy material in the soil that can't break down any further. The process to reach humus takes years, but the good news is that compost still delivers all the benefits while it's on its way to becoming humus. What makes compost so powerful is that the nutrients don't wash away like liquid fertilizer does. They stick around on the soil particles, feeding your plants slowly over time. And it's not just nutrients. Compost improves your soil itself. It helps it hold water, drain better, and breathe better. The last piece is having plants growing in your soil as much as possible, since the roots do provide that readily available food for the microbes that break compost down so that the whole cycle keeps working for you. Now, when I first started composting, especially after I took my Master Gardener classes, I got so caught up in the science that I got in my own way. The truth is, all the overthinking just kept me from actually making compost. What made the difference was trying simple methods that fit into my life, because honestly, I'd rather spend 10 minutes turning a pile than hours reading about the perfect way to do it. You don't need to know all the complicated ratios or rules to get it right. The recipe for compost is actually pretty simple. It's air, water, carbon, and nitrogen. Think of it like cooking. You're just mixing ingredients together. Carbon comes from your browns like dried leaves or shredded paper, and nitrogen comes from your greens like kitchen scraps or grass clippings. I'll give a more detailed list in a little bit. So you just add them in about equal parts. Give everything a quick mix once a week to add air, and add water so the moisture level is like a wrung out sponge, a lot like your goal when you water your plants. If the ingredients are too wet, there may be too many greens, and that can be balanced out by adding more browns. That's really it. Oxygen, water, carbon, and nitrogen are all you need. So the strategy you need to figure out is the method that actually fits your life and your space. Let me show you 5 easy options, and I'll tell you which ones work best for me after years of trial and error. Before we dive into the different composting methods, let me give you a quick cheat sheet of greens and browns so that you know what to toss in. Greens are nitrogen rich, and that would be like kitchen scraps, like fruit and veggie peels, cores, and also coffee grounds. Even though they're brown, they're actually considered greens because they're high in nitrogen. Fresh grass clippings, garden trimmings, non-woody stems, and spent plants. Manure from herbivores like rabbits and chickens, and used tea leaves and tea bags. Browns are carbon rich, and they would include dry leaves, straw, or hay, not sprayed with herbicides, shredded cardboard or paper, no glossy coating, sawdust or wood shavings, untreated wood only, dry plant stalks, corn cobs, or nut shells. A quick note is that the organic matter you add in is going to break down faster if it's cut down into fairly small pieces. Let's start with the composting method most people try first, and for good reason. The lazy pile. It's maintenance free. You just dump in scraps and yard waste in a corner of your yard and wait. Sounds easy, right? But the problem is, it usually doesn't work the way we hope. I had one of these at my old property, a huge pile sitting in the back corner, and honestly, it just sat there. I never got usable compost from it. Every time I walked past, it felt more like a reminder of a failure than something useful for my garden. It's where we used to put our chicken bedding and manure, garden scraps, and some lawn waste when we had it. A big part of why I didn't tend to the pile was because it was in the back corner of the property where the copperhead snakes hung out, so I didn't design that for the convenience I needed, and it became so big that I really needed more than just me and my pitchfork to turn it. Now, the lazy pile can work if you've got a lot of space and a lot of patience. Given enough time, sometimes a couple of years, it'll eventually break down. But for most of us, especially in small spaces, it just wastes space and doesn't give you compost when you actually need it. That's why I moved on to more structured systems. The next one, the 3-bin system, does work, but it's not for everybody. Let me show you why. The 3-bin system fixes many of the problems the lazy pile creates, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, mainly because of space. If you have a small backyard where you can tuck in a 2 or 3 bin setup and enough scraps and yard waste to feed it, this method is worth considering. If you want compost to actually finish and finish faster, this is a classic system for a reason. This is what I finally set up, which fits my space and works for my family of 4, and I have plenty of lawn and kitchen scraps to maintain a good mix of greens and browns. Vigo sent me this one to try, and I was able to set it up by myself next to my shed, even in my small space garden. It's been super easy to use, and I've loved all of their other products over the years. Each bin is 3 by 3 by 3 feet. The key to faster compost in this system is hot composting, which is heating the center of your pile to at least 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which kills weed seeds and disease pathogens. To make that happen, you need a steady supply of nitrogen and carbon, plus oxygen and moisture. Turning the pile about once a week helps the oxygen keep flowing and the temperature up. If you find the temperature dropping, you can add more greens and water and turn the pile to get oxygen in there. You can add a shovelful of garden soil to introduce more microbes as well. Pile size does make a difference because if it's too big, then it's unmanageable like my old lazy pile. If it's too small, the microbes can't really work efficiently. A good manageable size for me is around 3 by 3 by 3 to around 4 by 4 by 4 feet. Here's why multiple bins are so helpful. If you keep adding new scraps to the same one pile, it's never going to finish. But with 2 or 3 bins, you can have compost at different stages, from the new pile to the cooking down pile and then the finished pile. When the first bin is finishing, the next one is already cooking down, and eventually the third takes over. For my family and all the yard and garden waste I generate, this system has the capacity for a steady flow of compost ready for the garden. In a well-managed hot 3-bin system, compost can finish in as little as 1 to 6 months, depending on how much attention you give it. In winter, it slows down because the microbes and bacteria aren't as active, and so the pile can also even freeze, kind of pausing the process. But once temperatures rise up, it picks back up again. Now, if you want something that takes up even less space and makes turning compost even easier, the next method, which is a compost tumbler, might be a good fit. I'll also share why it didn't work for me so that you can avoid the same frustration. If you can't have an open pile, maybe your HOA doesn't allow it, or you just don't want it in view, a compost tumbler seems like a great alternative, and at first glance, it really is. I set one up a few years ago at the side of my huge garden. I knew I'd be moving soon, and I wanted to keep composting without the huge lazy pile dragging me down. Adding scraps and turning it was simple. The benefits of a tumbler are very clear. It's easy to turn, and it's a contained, compact system, but there are trade-offs. Capacity is limited, so if you make it too big, it's not going to turn easily, and it defeats the whole purpose. For me, the system never got hot enough. I monitored it with a Monty monitor that the company sent me to try out, which is really cool to watch in the app. And anyway, the compost stayed slimy no matter how many browns I added. The problem with the tumblers are that the lids are so tight so that there's little air circulation, and without enough oxygen or a way for moisture to evaporate, the pile in my tumbler just stayed too wet and it never finished. Finally, I want to share my absolute favorite composting method, which is vermicomposting or worm composting. But I still chose a 3-bin hot system over that for my current garden because this method works a little bit differently. Vermicomposting is a cold composting process relying on worms and microorganisms to break down organic material at moderate temperatures, usually between 55 degrees to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So unlike hot composting, it never gets hot enough to handle big amounts of yard waste, and I have bigger amounts of yard waste here, but it's perfect for kitchen scraps and small amounts of chopped leaves as browns if that's what you have. I tried a few worm bin versions over the years, one multi-layered cedar bin that I had set on a patio and a simple tote bin, but the one that blew me away was a 2 by 4 foot cedar bin. It had slats for airflow, a hinged lid, and a divider creating 2 sections. I even dug it 75% into the ground and lined the bottom with bricks, which kept the worms happy in a more natural environment. I added a single batch of red worms and they thrived and multiplied for 5 years. The worm population naturally adjusted itself to the amount of scraps there were. Every day I'd add kitchen scraps, cover with a layer of browns, and then close the lid. Once one side was full, I'd start adding to the opposite side, and when the worms finished the first side, they'd move through the divider slats to start the next side, almost like a mini 3-bin system. It was simple, low maintenance, and the worms stayed healthy the entire time. This setup is amazing because it combines the benefits of outdoor composting with proper ventilation and a lid to keep it tidy for a small space. It's pretty easy to build yourself, and you could even make it a 3-bin setup if you wanted to. Out of the worm bins I tried, this one was by far the most successful. The others never really produced enough worms, and I never really got much compost out of them. If you've been intimidated by worm bins, this one makes it simple and practical and really fun. Now, if you want the absolute lowest maintenance option and one that fits even in the tiniest space, let's talk about countertop composters. Vigo actually sent me one of these to try out while I was in rebuild mode after moving from my big garden, and I was so grateful for it because I didn't have my outdoor compost system set up yet, but I still had daily kitchen scraps. It gave me a way to keep composting without hassle, even when I was in moving transition mode. The beauty of this system is how simple it is. You don't need to balance greens and browns or worry about turning or watering it because it's fully automated. You just toss in your scraps, push a button, and it does all the rest. And then in just a couple of days, you've got a small batch of compost that's perfect for container gardens, raised beds, or even houseplants. It's not going to produce the large volumes you'd need for a big garden, but if you're in a small space or just starting out, it's an easy way to keep food waste out of the trash while still feeding your plants. So whether you're in a big backyard, a small patio, or even just an apartment, there's a composting method that will fit your life. And here's the bottom line. There's no single best composting system. It really comes down to what fits your lifestyle, your space, and your energy. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Even the smallest effort, like tossing scraps into a countertop unit, can make a difference for your plants and reduce waste. The key is choosing the system that works with your life and not against it. Compost is just the start, and my free training that I linked below will show you exactly how to set up a small space garden that feeds you without acres of land or endless hours. So here's my challenge for you. Stop letting the grocery store control what you eat and how much you pay. You can take that power back. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.